Okay, good morning everybody. I can see that our attendees are climbing through the roof, which our panel will be pleased to know. So far we have 55 people who are online with us. So good afternoon everybody. We will begin in a few moments. We're just going to allow for everybody else to log on. And while we're doing that, I will just give a brief introduction of who I am. So my name's Craig Donaldson, and by now most of you will have had some correspondence with me, as I am the course advisor for this course. So what do I do? So generally my role is to answer any questions that you have leading up to the application stage. And these typically include how much the course costs, entry requirements, when should the application form be submitted. So generally that's what I'm there for. People get in touch with me to help them move their application form along. So what I wanted to do before I hand over to the panel is just give you kind of a brief introduction of how this is going to look today. So in a moment, the panel will run through a number of slides. This will include a short video clip of a current student. And along the way, we do invite you to send some questions through to the panel, which I will monitor from here, and I'll pitch to Ange, Fran and Pete as we get to that section of the presentation. And also I just wanted to kind of clear up why you can see 4 different webcams in 4 different rooms. So you can all see our homes. So at the moment we are working remotely, and this is following advice from the university, where we have closed non-essential buildings, keeping everybody safe and helping support those great guys out there such as the NHS and other key workers who are doing their very best to look after us all. So it's really just making sure that we stay safe, but still at the same time, as they say, keeping the show going on. Okay, so I think with that, I can hand over to our panel. So Ange, over to you.
Good morning. Thanks, Craig, for a fantastic introduction. Delighted to speak to you all this morning, or just about this afternoon in the UK. So first of all, to introduce myself, I'm the course director for this programme. I've been working with clinical bioinformaticians, training clinical bioinformaticians since about 2013, working with them to train bioinformaticians that work in the NHS. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Pete and Fran. Would you like to introduce yourself, guys?
Yep, sure. I'm Fran. Sorry, Pete.
You go first.
I'm Fran Hooley, Technology Enhanced Learning Lecturer. Worked in the field of education and private sector for a number of years in terms of learning design and learning technologies, and worked within the field of clinical bioinformatics education since 2016. So that's me.
My name's Peter Causey-Freeman. I'm a lecturer in healthcare sciences, specialised in genomics, bioinformatics. To be honest, I started off as a laboratory scientist back in about 2004. After 12 years, decided to switch into informatics, taught myself programming, and went down the interest in the clinical side. And last year I was lucky enough to secure a role at the University of Manchester teaching alongside Ange, so I also teach the NHS scientists in this field.
Brilliant, thanks. So what we'd like to do for you all this morning is we get a lot of questions about, particularly about the programming unit and the programming aspects within the course. So we're going to focus on that in this webinar today. But just to start off, I'll give a very brief introduction to the course, and then we can answer more detailed questions towards the end of the webinar if you've got any more specific questions. Okay, thanks, Craig. We have the first slide. We're going to keep it simple, so Craig's going to do the slide switches for us.
No problem, Ange. And we've gone through you guys, haven't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so very brief background about the course. So as mentioned, we've been teaching bioinformaticians, training bioinformaticians for the NHS workforce since around 2013. And in fact, most of the team, almost the entire team that are involved in delivering this programme have been involved in training bioinformaticians working in the NHS. And so by nature of that, The course is a very applied course, so we're focused on developing the knowledge and skills that you'll need to work in a very applied clinical bioinformatics environment, focused on delivering the knowledge and skills using real-world case studies. In terms of who it's suitable for, so we've had a range of healthcare professionals so far, including laboratory technologists, clinicians, computer scientists, clinical scientists, research scientists. So we've got a broad spectrum of backgrounds, and we felt that we've been able to cope with that really well in the first cohort of students that have gone through the programme. And of course, genomics, particularly in the UK, is rapidly expanding. We're now doing whole genome sequencing, so we're delivering the skills and the knowledge that apply to that rapidly evolving healthcare environment in terms of genomics. Thanks, Craig.
No problem.
Okay, so very briefly, we've got 4 units that make up the course. So the first is Introduction to Clinical Bioinformatics. And here we focus very much on getting the basics, introduction to molecular biology and genetics, and then we move on to introducing bioinformatics. And we sort of scaffold this learning all around interpreting a clinical genomic variant. So we're going to be using the databases and the tools and the literature that you'd typically be using if you're working in an applied field to do that within healthcare. We've then got the introduction to health informatics, and that's much more about mapping patient journeys, mapping patient pathways, and thinking about clinical coding systems. So that's divided into 3 different parts, and we can go into that in more detail. We'll then have the introduction to programming, so that's really focused on applied skills in Python, which Fran and Pete are going to discuss in more detail in a moment. And then we've got the final course, which really, the final unit, sorry, which brings all of those aspects together. And it's a very applied unit where we focused on developing the skills that you'd need to build a bioinformatics workflow to actually analyse human genomic data that comes off next generation sequencing machines. Okay, thanks, Craig.
Oh, no problem.
So yeah, we just wanted to highlight a few screenshots of the course and give you a bit of information around the learning materials that we're using. And very much we wanted to build a course that supported all learners, especially if you're learning from a distance. So this slide just sort of illustrates that we've tried to build the coding activities in incremental steps. So 1, 2, and 3, there's 3 sprint weeks, we call them, where you'll be full on in teams, working together, trying to fulfill the activities. But it's very much because obviously you're trying to juggle work, you're trying to juggle family and home as well as study. So we're very clear in terms of the structured approach to the 10 weeks, where you'll have a clear idea as to when you're going to discuss certain things and when you're going to be assessed. And we've got support from 2 knowledgeable postdoc students who are supporting the facilitation of the course, as well as Pete and myself, who will be available at a set time every week on that particular day, just to support you. So that just gives you a flavour of the distance learning support. If you want to move on, please, Craig. And then we're just going to sort of look at, these are just a couple of screenshots. So we've used Jupyter Notebooks, which I'll cover in a minute, but we've used Rise, but very much so as you go through, it's structured in very small steps, so you can then look at, you know, maybe you've got a series of articles to read, but you can look at the materials and suss out when you can do it and fit it in with everything else that you've got on. So it's very clear, very well signposted. It's clear where the learning objectives are and what the actual learning materials relate to those learning objectives, and it's in a clear, consistent style as well. So it's just screenshots to sort of give you a flavour of what you'll see. If you want to move on, please, Craig.
Sure.
And this is Jupyter Notebooks. Now, I don't know if people have used these before, but again, these are interactive web-based notebooks which give you again, it's that stepped approach, very small individual steps where you can try in sort of an environment where you're not, you know, it's not sort of high risk with, you know, sharing with other people. These are your own notebooks that you'll work through the materials and you can code, and it's got the instruction with it as well and the practice-based elements with the actual coding as well. So those are the Jupyter Notebooks, and we deliver all of the materials, pretty much all the materials using these. Just want to move on again, please, Craig. essential to the course, and Anne just touched on it, and Pete will go through this as well, but is the use of real world tools, so that we create an environment that is very much authentic and you can immerse yourselves in that, and it's essentially using the tools and techniques that you would use back in practice to code. So I don't know if you can see the words on the slide here, but we use Slack hugely for any team-based discussions. As I mentioned, we're using Jupyter notebooks, which are housed on GitHub, so you'll get to grips with using GitHub and Git. And on the sort of bottom right-hand side of that slide, we use, in the assess discussions, we use Git issues, which you would use in a back in practice, to sort of ask questions or to use to kind of share with your team. And there's a wiki on there as well. We have some links to different resources, because what we want to do is build something that you can then take away. And the wiki is there for you to sort of see the resources that are already out there, and also refer to kind of Stack Overflow, etc., to sort of help you when you leave the course, you can sort of hit the ground running. And there's a selection of the tools, PyCharm and Anaconda, or prompt that we use as well. And if you just move on again, please, Craig. Just sort of completing that real world approach. We kind of look at agile and waterfall methodologies, and we use agile approaches and methods within the course materials. We also hear from and have developed the materials, and will be developing them again with people who are in the field. So that video on the left hand side is a video of somebody who's, because it's an unfortunate angle for him there, but we use a lot of materials that are already out there, and people who are, clinical bioinformaticians. The top two, and I'll leave Pete to kind of go through in more detail around the variant validator site, but using those agile methodologies, we use user stories. So those are user requirements that are defined from practice, and we ask the students to actually contribute those and work with those for some of the coding activities. So again, very much real world, immersive, authentic sort of learning materials and tools. I think that's my final slide.
Okay, Fran, I'll move on.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm just going to pick up on a few points that Fran made there then. The whole idea around this course is that we know that within 10 weeks we cannot teach you to be programmers. What we can do is we can teach you how to become programmers. So one of the questions that we get asked quite frequently is, do I need any previous experience? Well, no, you don't. If you look at the 2019 cohort, so last year's cohort, almost half had never done any coding before, and only a few, less than 10%, had actually regularly coded. But the great thing is we've made this a very immersive development environment deliberately, so that even experienced coders can get something from this. And this works really nicely. If we can have a nice blend, it means that the inexperienced coders can learn from the experienced coders, and there's different roles in teams which each person can fulfill and learn how to code effectively. So what we're actually aiming here is to teach you the tools where you can get peer support, where you can go online and find code and redevelop that code, reuse it. It's all about teaching you the ethos of peer-supported learning and self-help, and this is how you develop as a programmer. One of the reasons this course is kind of structured the way it was is because it very much is about my experiences of learning to be a programmer. I started about 5 years ago, and pretty much every single mistake that I've made along the way has been sorted out and put into the learning material to give you an idea of what you should do and how to do it more effectively, and don't make the mistakes I did, do it really well. So that's what we're going to teach you. The Slack forum, I'm going to pick up on that, is really how we deliver this material. The way this works is that if you need support, we can be contacted asynchronously. We obviously, if you're in a different time zone, you cannot necessarily expect us to be there all the time, but at least through Slack you can post something or a direct message, we can get back to you, we can help you, we can assist you. Also, one of the things we do encourage is, I'm not gonna, and Fran's not gonna, and Ange isn't gonna tell you all the answers. The beauty of this is you've got a team. You go to your team. We're going to teach you to go and seek out help from your peers, and that's how you learn. They're going to help you through this, and it's really effective, and that is the ethos behind learning to program. we move on again, please, Craig?
Sure.
So a little bit more about how this is structured. So we very much focus this, as Anne said, to meet a clinical need. So there's three aspects on the top of this that I'm going to tell you about. So we are going to do exercises that teach you how to access genomics data. We're going to do this in such a way that you can go external via a website, which is called an API. You can bring back the data you need, and it's available for you to then use. The reason we teach it this way is because trying to maintain and install and get all these data structures working is practically impossible. Even for an experienced programmer, it takes ages to maintain all this stuff, but there are resources out there where you can get this data from. So we're going to teach you how to get the data. But it's all about quality as well. In clinical settings, we need to know about data quality. So we're going to teach you how to assess the accuracy, the completeness, the consistency, the quality of that data you pull back, and learn how to extrapolate the data that you know to be good. And then we're going to teach you methods that allow you to present that data in a nice structured format so it can be used. But we're also going to do this to teach you as a concept for becoming a clinical coder, a clinical programmer. So we're going to teach you about the styles of coding that you should follow, how to keep your code neat. The simple fact is that you need to be able to go back in a few years and be able to read it and understand it. So we teach you the formats. We also teach you how to document the code. It could well be that you pass this code on to someone else because you work in a team environment. If they don't know how to run the code, it's useless. So we're going to teach you how to document effectively, how to communicate what you've done to other people. The final step is testing. The data you return from your code has got to be robust. So the reason we apply these unit tests, these automated testing, to make sure that every time something changes, the core outputs remain the same. We're going to teach you all these skills. These are necessary in the clinical field. And so this is how we've structured course, very much applied, very much teaching how to program to the level of a clinical programmer. And that's why I'm saying the experienced people can get something from this, because these skills are brilliant, even if you're an experienced programmer, because many people don't do it. Documentation very rarely gets done. It's essential. So we really need to push that. Next slide then, please.
Sure.
So as Fran said, we've structured this very much around small bite-sized chunks. The real world aspect of this is delivered in sprints, which are small activities that are based around developing code for a clinical need. Now, the majority of these you'll do as teams, and we actually go out into contact our sources in clinical bioinformatics and ask them to come up with problems. So they have actually told us things that they need, so that we can put it to you as a question and give you the opportunity to develop something that could go back into the clinical use. At the end, we then have another activity where you get to develop your own code. And what we ask you to do is provide user stories. So we want you to be able to provide, you know, I am a such and such, I need to do this for this reason. And then we encourage you to try and build a tool that fits into your own practice. And some of the tools that we've seen this year have been excellent, and really happy with those. However, some people weren't in the field. So another nice way that we structure this is I have a piece of software that I develop and maintain that is used in a clinical setting called Variant Validator. The tool itself is designed to check the syntax and check the validity of DNA variation descriptions. And one of the things that we give you the opportunity to do in this unit throughout is to contribute code that could then be adapted and put onto this live platform that will be used around the world. So we're actually giving you the opportunity to develop code that other people around the world could end up using. So you actually get to benefit a project, my project. So it's very much a real thing. We really want to build a real need around this. I think that's my section done, Craig.
Okay, I'll just move that on, Pete. Oh, Ange, can you put your volume back on, please, Ange?
Sorry, I was trying not to interfere with anyone else's section. So we're really keen, as we've now had one cohort of students through the course, that we shared with you what our current students that are just completing the course have thought. So I'm just going to read through this. So this was from one of our students that's currently undertaking the course. He said, as an NHS clinician with very little experience of coding, the course, and specifically the introduction to programming, has a steep learning curve. The modules have all been challenging, but the accessibility of tutor support and their proactive approach to supporting students has meant that I've never felt lost. And as a non-specialist in the field, the course has provided me with a toolkit to understand the specific role that bioinformatics plays within the NHS. Whether one goes on to undertake further study in this field or not, this PG cert covers much of the material that a clinician will need familiarity with in the evolving healthcare landscape. So we've got a lot of people from a very clinical background, clinicians, scientists, etc. And you know, they've all sort of been doing the course whilst typically working full time as well. So they've managed to do that balance as well. So I think now we're going to share with you another clip from somebody who's got much more of a computing background to share with you now.
Sure.
So this is Beverly Taylor, who's going to share her experiences of the course. Craig, I'm not sure we can hear the volume for the video.
Oh, apologies, Ange. Let me see if I can make sure it's turned up. Is there still volume coming through now, Ange, or none?
No, we can't hear her, unfortunately.
I'll just see if I can try and correct this, Ange. I do apologise.
Sorry for this, everybody.
Yeah, I do apologise. It seems to be coming through my laptop fine, Ange, and I can't for the life of me understand when we're sharing my computer audio. Let me just see if this has made any difference at all. Okay. That made any difference, Ange?
Okay, not to worry. Shall we just move on to the final section then?
I do apologise, Ange. I can share this with anybody that would like to see the video as well.
Sure.
But I'll move on to the next slide.
Okay, so I guess just to summarise Beverly's sort of thoughts there, she's much more from a computing background, so she had to get up to speed with the genetics, genomics, just to share with you really that she felt supported and she was able to catch up with all of that content because we have lots of synchronous tutorials where we all meet with the students on the course, and we have regular check-ins at least 2 or 3 times per course unit. And there's lots of opportunity throughout the discussion boards to raise questions, and we discuss the work that's been going on in that particular week. So that happens on a weekly basis. So I think with that, we'd probably like to wrap up the formal part of the webinar and begin to take any questions you might have. But also wanted to mention that we've got a free massive online open course that covers the area of clinical bioinformatics. It's on the FutureLearn MOOC platform, and you can see the link here, and it's running at the moment. So feel free to join that if you'd like to get a flavour of what the sort of content would be that you'd be learning on the PG cert. So yeah, so I think we'll begin to take some questions if anyone's got any questions.
Sure. We've had a few come through, Ange, and I will pitch them to the panel. So the first has come from Sama, who would like to know if there will be a certificate at the end and what that will look like. What will it say on the certificate?
Yeah, shall I take that? So there will be a certificate at the end. So you'll get, it's called a PG certificate, so postgraduate certificate in clinical bioinformatics, which is equivalent to 60 credits of learning at the university. If you want to as well, there is also an opportunity to come and actually attend the graduation that we'll be hosting. Either it's normally in the summer or potentially later on in December when we hold the graduations with other master's courses. So you'll get that as a formal transcript of your course that you've undertaken.
Thanks, Ange. Lucy has asked, how would group work for distance learners?
Okay, Fran, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, so I alluded to it earlier when we went through the slides, in that what we've tried to do is provide a platform outside of the usual virtual learning environment that is called Slack, and it's a team-based channel, various different channels on the platform, and it allows you to work it as a team and share files and share links, etc. So we've got the platform to support it. But what we try and do with the facilitators' assistance as well, with them being available each week at a certain time, we make sure that that we're checking in on that Slack channel and seeing if you've got any issues. We've got direct messaging as well, so if you needed to take something offline to support the teamwork, then you can directly contact myself or Pete or any of the facilitators. So what we try to do is it's, you know, it's a dedicated platform for teamwork, and we can sort of have support that informal discussion, but at the same time the teamwork is then formally assessed using Git issues. So as and again, I alluded to it before, but it's essentially a place on GitHub where you work as a team and you kind of send any issues that you've got on the coding that you're doing. So with those different platforms, we've kind of got full support for you, so that the teamwork activity is, you know, is in the right place, and you're fully supported. And I did mention before around the assess discussions as well, where we look at how you're working as a team on Slack, but then we also support you as well on Git issues, and the assessment is looking at how well you support each other, and really kind of getting scripts with that peer-led learning. So that's kind of the tools that we use and the approach that we take. If that answers your question.
I'll expand on that slightly as well, because the reason that we've structured it the way it is these are very much the tools that you will use in a normal development environment. It's very, very simulation. It's very, very realistic. The reason that we've chosen to use GitHub and Git, and these are standard version control software. We cover version control, so you'd learn about this. But the idea here is that it is set up for team working. One of you can code something, you can push your code up to a cloud, your colleagues can then pull that code down, make changes, push it back up. You can literally work collaboratively. You can develop together, co-develop, create. But that's what we do. That's the kind of stuff I'm doing all the time. It's this is why we want to give you this experience, because it's realistic, it's real.
Thanks both.
Thanks, guys. Amit would like to know, is this course designed specifically for someone dealing with genomic data, or can this course cater to organisations not dealing with genomic data but other clinical data?
Yeah, shall I take that one? Yeah, I mean, it's very focused around human genomic data, really. So, you know, we're not talking about clinical trial data, or it's around human genomic data, and really the sort of data that we'd expect to see in clinical diagnostic laboratories. Next generation sequencing data is a large focus of what we're looking at. A lot of the skills you develop in terms of looking at pipelines, etc., you could apply to infectious disease pipelines, sort of microbial, virology pipelines. Some of the same tools will be there, but our focus is very much around the human genomics within this course. Yeah. Thanks,
Ange. Ehab has asked a question. Just pulling it to, it's come through in a couple of parts, Ange, so I'll pitch this to you guys now. I think Ehab would like to know some of the learning tools that you guys offer. Will this include algorithms as well? Or I guess what Ehab is trying to say is, will there be algorithms included in this course?
So, yeah, I mean, so it depends what you mean. Algorithms is a very broad term. Obviously, there's algorithms that underpin a lot of the tools that we'll introduce you to, and you'll be looking at to analyze some of your data when you do alignments, etc. If you mean algorithms in terms of machine learning algorithms, that's not a focus of this course. We're not looking. here at Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning. It's really around the tools that you would use to process the genomic data.
I think you touched on the question there, actually, Angie. Ehab was referring there. I can just see a bit more of that question around kind of using machine learning tools. So that's great that you were able to include that. The next one from Violetta is not a question, but she is saying hello from Melbourne in Australia. So hello to you.
Hello.
Hello.
It's always
What
nice.
time? It must be the middle of the night there or something.
Yeah. Hopefully she may well come back and tell us. Okay. Amit has asked another question. Are there any live online sessions or video content that will be used throughout the course?
Fran, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of live sessions, I mentioned before we're having the live synchronous sessions each week. So each week there will be educators and facilitators who will be online to support you. There isn't actually video conferencing sessions as such. We may include that based on feedback, but we thought that the platform itself to kind of share code and how you would discuss things online, we've kept with Slack for that. What was the other part of the question? The other part of the question was something on.
I'm just trying. I've just lost it, I think.
Shall I just follow up as well there? I guess that's the programming course, but some of the other units we did have regular tutorials. So we had probably up to around 3 face-to-face tutorials, and just to cover this in case it crops up, what we did was we looked at all of the representative countries of the cohort last time, and we decided on the best time zone that fitted all of the countries. Now it might be that we'll have to run a couple of different tutorials, but yeah, for some of the other the non-programming based units, we did have around 3 face-to-face synchronous tutorials with all of the students together.
I think the other question was around video content.
That's right.
So yeah, we have there was a screenshot earlier of one of the videos, and there's a couple of them in terms of introducing the sprints that we use from people in practice, and some I think that video was from a clinical bioinformatician talking about agile methods that they've used in their own projects. So there is video content there, but like Ange says, I think possibly it's more so in the other units where very short videos, nothing longer than say 5 minutes, I think is the standard amount of time. So we don't want you just sit there staring at a screen. So very short videos, but more so in the other units rather than the programming one.
Thanks, Fran. Amit has asked another question. Apart from the tools such as Slack and other coding portals, what are the learning resources and the textbooks, articles that we might use as well during the course?
So yeah, I can, as Fran mentioned earlier, the actual course is delivered in the interactive Jupyter notebooks. These are all downloaded onto your machine and you can run them locally. One of the things we've chosen to do with this unit is make sure that when you leave the course, your machine is configured so that you can continue programming. All the materials go with you, you can then use them. Your machine is good to go. We're not going to provide you a nice sterile environment, we're going to do something real. As for other resources, everything's online content, so we point you out really good resources for learning coding, continuing your development and things like that. So you'll actually get anything we've created, you'll keep, you can run locally. Anything we've sourced externally is open source, so you can get at it. So hopefully that answers the question. All the material will be available to you when the course has ended.
That's great, thanks, Pete. Eva has asked, how could we prepare for the programming elements of this course before it begins? I guess she might be referring to some maybe some pre-reading material, perhaps, do you think?
Yeah, I think that my advice really, if you've not done any programming before, is it's a resource that we point to quite a lot. It's called W3 Schools. That's W3 Schools, all one word. If you Google it, they offer a nice introduction to Python. If you work your way through that, you'll be in a good place for starting this unit. I wouldn't worry too much about the more technical tools like GitHub and all that kind of thing. We'll introduce them, but the thing that people tend to get most nervous about is, oh, I've never programmed before, I don't know what to do. And the best way to learn is go and do some of the basics, and that W3 Schools tutorial is really nice.
And possibly the software carpentry online resources as well. They're a good starter.
That's really helpful, thanks guys. Ankita has asked, will the certificates be supportive towards applying for a PhD?
Yeah, so we get asked a lot of questions, I guess, around can I be a bioinformatician? Can I use it for a PhD? I think it will be useful for any of those. I mean, we're seeing a growing number of our postgraduate students that really want programming skills. So we're using some of this material actually to support some of our own postgraduate research students. So certainly it will put you in a really strong place to be analysing your own data within a PhD setting. So yeah, I don't think per se you can use it as sort of credits towards a PhD at Manchester, but certainly it's going to give you a lot of good background, solid knowledge that'll place you in good stead for any sort of translational kind of clinical research activity. Yeah.
Thanks, Ange. I'll just move on to our next question. Okay, so Norhen has asked, when does the course start?
Okay, so this next course starts at the end of May. So that's if you want to do the full postgraduate certificate. If there's particular units that you think you might be more interested in, or you want to just do on a sort of what we call a CPD basis, then we take each application to those individual units on its own merit. So please do get in touch and we'll certainly look at your applications if you want to just do 1 or 2 units.
Amit has asked another question, but I think we've got a couple of slides that might help with this actually, Ange. Amit has asked, how many hours of self-study per week is required or recommended?
Okay, yeah. Do you want to whiz on to those last extra couple of slides then, Craig, and we'll just cover this?
Yeah. I think, I'm sorry, Ange, I've got the questions open on my screen, so I've got just the corner of the slide. It might be the next one actually, I think.
Okay. Great. So a bit of background here on, so this is entry requirements. So we do take people based on clinical experience. So we judge, as I say, each application on its own merit, but as a general ballpark sort of guidelines, we require a minimum of a 2:1 honours degree or international equivalent thereof in a biological, medical, physical or computational science kind of subject. So we allow quite a bit of variety there in the backgrounds we'll allow onto the course. And in exceptional circumstances, we do allow a 2:2 if you've got additional master's, PhD or professional experience. You can see the fees of the course there. And in terms of learning hours, I think we cover that on the next, is that the next slide, Craig?
Just move us on now.
Brilliant. So yeah, so it's fully online. You undertake it sort of over a 12-month period. It's 4 15-credit units, as we discussed before. Each unit runs for 10 weeks and the estimated amount of learning is around 15 hours on average, and you'll be doing some discussion board contribution. You'll be perhaps creating a presentation towards the end of that unit, and you might submit a short report, but everything should be contained within that 10 weeks of study essentially. Yeah, so we take breaks off for over August and we have a break over Christmas and the Easter period as well.
Thanks, Ange. So Silvana has asked, although she understands that bioinformatics course is primarily for clinical settings, but does the course touch on, let me just make sure I get this right, tools for de novo sequencing? I'm not sure who that would apply to and if that is how
Shall I take that? So it's something we've thought about in the applied NGS unit. So some of the tools that you would use so you would use de novo sequencing if you were looking at microbial genomes, for example. We do touch on, say, nanopore sequencing. We've not gone into the analysis in detail. So but certainly you get a good background in something like long read sequencing. We've covered that, and in fact Pete wrote some of that material for the last unit. But yeah, we don't go into the algorithms in a lot of depth on something like de novo sequencing.
Okay, thanks, Ange. I'm just working through to our next question. So Halifa has asked, do you recommend somebody to take this course as an introductory course if you are looking to pursue a PhD in bioinformatics?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a really good background course for you if you wanted to go into a research career in bioinformatics. Clearly, we are very clinically focused, but if that's where your interest lies, then I would suggest this is a very strong foundation base in which you're going to come out with the programming skills that will stand you in really good stead, I think, for that kind of research background. And particularly because we've made it so applied, you're going to come out with a lot of hands-on skills as well. Pete, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously depending on the types of bioinformatics, because the other units do cover things like a lot of the algorithms that we do use for analysing sequence data. So the advantage of this is that with the programming and knowledge of the algorithms, you can then start developing your own pipelines using the programming, which is one of the places I started programming. So it is really a nice blend of skills that will stand you in good stead, depending on the area of informatics. But then again, you are learning, although this is genetics focused, genomics focused, you are learning the skills that could be applied to other fields as well. So it's certainly be worthwhile.
Great. Okay. Somebody has asked the question I think I can answer very quickly, guys. Can we get all the slides at the end of the session? And I can say, yeah, they will be forwarded to everybody who's attended today and everybody who's registered. And I'll also make sure that the video of Bev is included in that as well.
Thanks, Craig.
No problem. Okay, so we've had a question. I'm a molecular genetic researcher. I need to interpret NGS data for physicians. Does this certificate allow me to write a clinical report?
So I think the first unit will stand you in really good stead for doing that. So in fact, the first unit is all around interpretation of clinical genetic variants. So we get you to actually do a real genetic variant interpretation. And then in fact, the assess piece is submission of a clinical report and also a presentation justifying your approach and how you've come to that interpretation, so whether you think it's pathogenic or not. So I think we'll get you in a pretty strong place to be able to formulate a clinical report that's of suitable quality to present for a clinician. So yeah.
Thanks, Ange. Andrew has asked, is there a research project element to the course, and what are the main programs used? I have experience using some with R and Python using TCGA data. So I think the question in there was around, will there be a project element attached to the course?
In terms of the programming unit, the final activity is very much a solo programming project, and we do ask you, where possible, to come up with ideas of your own, something that you want to achieve that's feasible, and we will support you through this. So I think that is definitely, for the programming unit, that is your kind of like bit of coursework. It's, you're developing something that you could use. If not, and you want us to help you with something or provide you with something, I'll provide you with a story of something that I'd like you to build, and I'll hopefully use it. For example, Bev, who you're going to see in the video, didn't have a particular project because she wasn't really working in that kind of field, so asked me, is there anything that I could provide her to do? And she has built a Python function for me that I'm going to add to my website, and she's going to actually now go ahead and add that for me, and we'll roll it out live in a couple of months. So yeah, there's loads of different opportunities to do a nice little solo project in this particular unit. Ange, I'm not sure about the other units. What's your take on those?
Yeah, so I mean, each one has some sort of very applied activity. If you mean in terms of a larger research project, that the course doesn't have that at the moment, because obviously that's something we'd do if it was a full master's program. But each one has some sort of almost group-based or applied activity that you'll do within each unit. But yeah, it's not got a full large research project attached to it.
Thanks, Ange. Thanks, Pete. So Sarah has asked, how many of your current cohort are going into clinical bioinformatic jobs at the end of the course, if we know that? And as a non-medic clinician, how well would this course prepare me for a job in this field?
So let's take the first part first. I mean, so we've not done an exit survey formally as yet to find out whether people are going to switch careers, etc. I mean, most of them are in full-time jobs, and I suspect are using it to augment and enhance their expertise at the moment. So we've not got a sense, because the course hasn't actually quite ended yet, the first cohort, in terms of where people are going. We certainly know from Bev's experience that she's very keen to get involved in a more clinical environment, so it's certainly kind of whetted her appetite. In terms of will it prepare you for that kind of role, obviously when we teach the students for the NHS, it is a full master's programme, but what we think we've done here is provide you with a sufficient of a background that you would certainly be able to work quite comfortably in a translational clinical bioinformatics kind of role within a laboratory that's supporting clinical work, and it'll set you in good stead for working in that clinical environment. So I think you would probably be able to look at applying for, very much applied bioinformatics roles at the end of the course.
Okay, thanks very much. Violetta has come back to say it's not the middle of the night, guys. It's only 9:30 p.m. So
not so bad.
Not so bad.
I'm glad you didn't have to stay up too late.
Yeah, I'm just moving through now, guys. There's quite a lot of questions here as well, which will be captured at the end of the webinar for me. So if we don't manage to catch them all, I can certainly pitch some of these questions. There's about another 25 questions to go. But we can.
I guess if we can take some of the ones we've not covered so far, and then we can group the others and send a response through.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll capture these at the end and send these across to you. I'll just see if you just give me a minute for those that you haven't answered. Okay. So Omar, this might be one that is unanswered so far. Omar has asked, is the NGS already established within the NHS facilities, and would taking this course help me with landing an NHS job?
Yeah, I mean, NGS is very much established in the NHS now. So we've rolled out a new clinical genomic service, genomic laboratory hubs, they're called, across the UK. So we're now doing clinical whole genome sequencing. So that's been rolled out in about the last 18 months or so. The way typically people get recruited is through Health Education England have a program that we also, that's kind of a closed program that they recruit clinical bioinformaticians to, but not everybody goes through that route. Some people work in laboratories through other master's programs, and also they're quite often interested in people with slightly more software engineering skills, or so there are other different routes in. So as I say, there is a specified training route, but that doesn't mean to say that it's a complete closed door for all of those kind of roles, I guess.
That's great. Just looking through the rest of the questions, Ange, and they are quite specific to the individual, and there's quite a lot. So would it be more use if I collated these at the end and sent them through to you for a response?
Yeah, I think we can.
Individual.
Yeah, let's try and get a response back to people, and so we can kind of bring the webinar to a close, I guess.
Yeah, there are quite a few to go. We could be here all day, I think. So I will get these at the end, and I'll send any unanswered ones across to you guys.
I think we maybe have lost Fran, but I guess in that case, we'll bring the webinar to a close then.
Sure.
And I'd like to thank you all, I guess, for sticking with us and for your attention, and yeah, for all your really engaged questions. We'll do our best to answer everything else that you've sent through, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ange.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.